Welcome to Ashley On, your one-stop podcast where we talk about health and wellness, spirituality, and all things new. Stick around as we delve deep into innovations to support a better world.
Hello and welcome to the show. Today's show is a great episode. We're talking to Andrew Jones from noahsarkscans.com. Andrew is leading the expedition now in Turkey to document and conduct all of the scientific surveys around what is believed to be Noah's Ark, which resides on the side of a mountain, Mount Arafat. And he's bringing science to the conversation in the face of, local turmoil and a difficult environment to work, as well as a lot of skepticism out there about the existence of Noah's Ark. Andrew has discovered Noah's Ark, and I think with this episode, all the science that he shares is overwhelming evidence to me that he has found Noah's Ark, and I look forward to his continued research to prove it even further. But even so far, they've discovered what scientists are saying with 95% confidence level that this is a boat resting on the side of this mountain, and it does match the dimensions almost exactly of what the Bible describes as being the size and shape of Noah's Ark. Wonderful show with Andrew Jones. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you. If you're looking to improve your memory or lower your stress and inflammation, you got to hear about our new sponsor, Igniton. Igniton is the world's first quantum wellness brand, merging ancient energetics with cutting-edge physics. And this stuff really works. It's clinically proven, and we'll talk about that in a second. Their formulas are charged with something called ignitons. They're subatomic quasi-particles from the sun and originally identified in private research at CERN. This is heavy physics. Igniton's space-age technology entangles these particles with supplement ingredients to supercharge them and make them work better. Here's what makes this really exciting. In university-led, peer-reviewed studies, Ignicognition, Igniton's flagship brain formula, was shown to improve total memory by 100% in just 30 days. That includes short-term, operational, and working memory. It's crazy. The Igni longevity formula, their cellular stress and aging formulation, reduced inflammation markers like C-reactive protein, or CRP, and interleukin-6, or IL-6, by 37% and 54% respectively in just 60 days. Huge impact. These studies were compared to both placebo and to the same supplement ingredients that were not charged with ignitons. This isn't hype. It's clinical, quantum-enhanced nutrition designed to help your body align with higher levels of clarity, coherence, and resilience. I've been using both formulations now for about 60 days, and seriously, I've never felt better. Sharper, I have more energy, I recover faster from my workouts, I don't get that afternoon swoon, and I'm even sleeping through the night, every night. Visit igniton.com and use code Ashley10 to get 10% off your first order. That's igniton.com, IGNITON.com. And the code is Ashley10 for 10% off your first order. Igniton, born from light, backed by science. Hello, Andrew Jones. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
It's great to meet you. I'm so excited for this conversation. So, just for our audience, you're leading the expedition that's discovering Noah's Ark. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this site was discovered before 1959 on September 11. A Turkish army captain, his name was İlhan Durupınar. He discovered it. He was hired by he was working for the Turkish military. He was mapping out eastern Turkey. And 1959 was the year that Turkey joined NATO. And so during the Cold War, their eastern border was on their boundary was with the Soviet Union at the time. And so this area is very important to map out. And so he was looking at these high altitude aerial photographs, and he discovered this boat shape like popping out of the ground on the side of one of the mountains in the mountains of Ararat. And so he got very excited, and they made an announcement 1 week later that we believe that Noah's Ark had been discovered. And so that hit the Turkish press, but the first photographs actually came out a month later, and that went around the world. This photograph in black and white of this boat-shaped object sitting on the side of the mountain. And yeah, so
Is
and then
that the
from
image?
there,
Is that the image on the screen behind you?
this was from '61, the black and white
Okay.
one on my I guess the right side. Yeah, so that was a couple years later. Well, that was a low. If I move over, you can see a little better.
Hmm.
That was a low flying, low aerial photograph. That was by Ara Güler. He was a famous Turkish photographer, and again, the Turkish military hired him and put him in a little biplane or something. He said he was scared to death later on when they interviewed him, but they flew just right off the ground, right off the mountainside there, and he got some really great photographs. But the famous one was from and I do have pictures, but I don't know if you could use them on a podcast. But at any rate, um, the famous one was from '59. That one was high altitude. That got
That's
everybody
awesome. Yeah,
excited.
maybe you could send them to me after this, and for those who are watching on YouTube, we could I can put them onto the actual stream of
I,
this when I record it.
sure, yeah.
So this is
Um,
fantastic. So let's go back in time, I guess, and tell us about yourself first. Like what? So tell us about you and how you got interested in this and what your background is in.
yeah, so fast forward, so I wasn't around in '59, but fast forward to early '90s when I was in middle school. A man named Ron Wyatt came out to California where I was living at the time, and it was a Thursday. I remember it was a Thursday night, and I was a geek back then, probably still am, but I had to do homework. I didn't want to skip out on some homework due the next day. But his meeting was a Thursday night. This guy who said he had found Noah's Ark. And so my dad went instead. I said, Father, I said, Dad, can you go see what this guy has to say and check out his material and all his data? And so my dad came back and said, Yeah, this man said he found Noah's Ark and other things. And so I had to get his book because he said he had a little booklet. So I bought it. And so this was 1990 or 91 when this happened. And at that time, there was no internet. So that was like 4 or 5 years later, people started using the internet. So I went ahead and called 411 I wanted to talk to this man. I had all these questions. And I was just a kid, early teens. And so I called 411. The operator passed me through. He said, Yeah, we have a Ron White in Madison, Tennessee. And here's the number. And you want me to connect you? I said, Yeah. And the guy picked up. And so I was very nervous, but I asked all these questions. And he said, Well, call me back tomorrow. I just got back from the Middle East. And so I did. I called him back the next day. And I talked to him for hours. And then the next after that, I called him again with more questions. And then from then on, from middle school until high school, ended in the mid '90s, and into college, I was having this phone conversation with people involved with the site, Ron Wyatt, David Fazold, these early explorers in the '80s who had seen the initial reports from 1959 to 1960. They were in their 20s at the time. And then Ron Wyatt came out in the 1970s, and then he started his research in the '80s, and that hit the news. And then he started doing meetings in different churches and groups, and that's how I, got interested in the site as a kid. Finally, in '95 and '96, I invited Ron White to come out to Sacramento, California, and we hosted him, and he did a bunch of meetings there over a weekend twice. And then in '97, that was my first trip out to the site. A friend of mine, Bill Fry, who is no longer around, but Bill and I went out there, and he needed a travel companion. He called me, and I was ready to go. And it was an amazing 4 or 5 days that first trip out here. We were kind of scared to death to be out here. We heard a lot of bad things about Eastern Turkey and being
Hmm.
kidnapped or robbed or whatever.
I'm sure.
Um, kind of like the Wild West. And so then in 2000, when I came out for two trips out here, we met Sally Brock Touton, who's one of our lead investigators. He's a retired geologist now, associate professor of geology. He used to teach in Eastern Turkey, but he's like the expert for this region for geology. And so I became good friends with him. And he was just here with our tour group, actually, explaining things to the group about the history and geology and the research that he's done. Well, after 2000, I was not really involved in anything out here. I was doing volunteer excavations in Israel. Myself, though, I went into computer programming right when I went into college, my parents said, "Don't go into archaeology because it's not going to pay you anything, and you'll always be fundraising." They said make that a serious hobby and instead go get a different career. And I'm glad I listened to them, but I still want to go back someday and get a degree in it. But anyway, so I went to computer programming, and that paid my bills and was able to let me travel and do things like this. But I came back to Turkey finally in 2013 and reconnected with old friends out here, and then got involved in trying to do more work because Ron White had already passed away, David Fazel passed away. These old the original explorers and promoters of the site who did all this the pioneering research, they were no longer around, and so we got permission, and we actually had the Science Channel, which is owned by Discovery Channel, come out in 2019, and that was the first year that we did a complete survey of the Ark using radar to look below the ground and see all what we could, different
Hmm.
substructures if there's any there. And it happened that the Science Channel was able to film the work, and that kind of started our most recent efforts on the site. From then on, we were trying to do anything possible to get the Turks interested in the site again. They had initially built the visitor center back in 1988, but or 87, but they kind of like left the site alone, and the visitor center was in disrepair, and yeah, people could still go up there, but it had an elderly man running the place, and the visitor center was empty, and no one was doing research on the site.
Hmm.
So we kind of picked up the ball and ran with it. And that's kind of where we're at today. Last year we did soil analysis. So some of these things have been in the news. The GPR scans in 2019 and the new soil analysis. Those are the two big items that hit the news the last 6 months.
So,
So
so
we're
let's go
very,
into that. Tell us a little bit
yeah.
about what you have found, and how maybe that differs from some of the past research that's been done, and obviously you have access to more modern technology. So let's go into that now.
Well, so the reason I like to backtrack though, because people might not realize this, but the reason people are interested in this site, number one, there's this boat shape on the side of a mountain, and
Hmm.
so in the Bible, in Genesis chapter 8, verse 4, where Moses wrote the location where Noah's Ark landed, he didn't give us the GPS. All he said
Right.
was the mountains of Ararat. So if you look at that phrase, mountains of Ararat, Ararat comes from an older word, Urartu. Now, I just went through the Van Museum where I'm at right now here in Eastern Turkey. And the Van Museum here has the main artifacts for the kingdom of Urartu. This was an Iron Age kingdom, but they started much earlier. And they cover this territory, that's this mountainous region of Eastern Turkey. So it would be like me writing today, Noah's Ark landed in the mountains of Turkey or Canada. So the
Mhm.
mountains of Ararat didn't name a peak; it just says in this mountainous region. And so here in this mountainous region, where the Bible says Noah's Ark should be, you're finding this boat-shaped object. Now, there's a couple things about that. Number one, there are critics who say, "Well, no, the Ark should have been a barge. This rectangular, um, flat-bottom barge that just floated out there on its own in the storm." And the big thing about that is the Bible does not say that. This is an assumption. The Bible gives very basic information, the capacity of the boat, by giving us the length, width, and height. It says it was one door, one window, and had three decks. It says nothing about how many animals were on board, how did the sewer system work, where was the kitchen, where do they sleep. So a lot of details are missing, and it does not say the shape or size. I'm sorry, the shape, but it does give us the size. And so if you look at that word ark, it's actually used other places in the Bible,
Mhm.
particularly where it talks about Moses as a baby. He was placed in a reed basket or ark. And I've been to Egypt many times, and in the museums in Cairo, you'll find examples of these reed arks, these baskets, and they're different shapes. There's some are round, some are oval, some are rectangular, some are square. And so the word had nothing to do with the actual whether the polygon or a triangle or anything. It had
Right.
nothing to do
Not
with
the
the shape.
shape. Right.
It has to do with the purpose or capacity. And so that, to save life. It's like a lifeboat. So that's the one thing that caught the guide's attention. Here you have this perfectly shaped ship on the side of a mountain in eastern Turkey. And so Captain Drupinar got excited when they went on the ground to actually measure the boat. But 1 year later, in the summer of 1960, an American team came out there. They met with Captain Drupinar. They went out there with the Turkish military, and they measured it, and it was exactly 300 cubits long. Now that's the length given in the Bible. So, that's a big coincidence or another positive fact that's pointing to this being, the probable buried remains of Noah's Ark. But you have this ship shape that's now exactly the length given in the Bible.
Wow.
Um, but again, it's just covered in dirt. It's a dirt-shaped object there. It's not. So if you're thinking about, oh, it's a perfectly preserved ship, like some people say they claim to have seen on the big volcano Ararat, which is just across the valley from our site, you're not going to find that. This is exactly what you find in archaeology for like Roman and Greek and earlier ships. Anything wooden, it decays away, leaves a chemical imprint in the soil, it leaves the shape, it could leave other artifacts, but you're not going to find a perfectly preserved barge anywhere. And so
Yeah,
what you're
it's
seeing
gonna
today
rot,
is,
right? I mean, it's gonna
yeah,
decay.
exactly. It's going to rot. It's going to get covered up with soil and dirt and rocks that come in and fall down on top of it. Um, so this is why Ron White got interested in it, and others, David Fazel and Baumgartner and Dr. Sally Brock-Tuton himself, he's still around. And so these earlier explorers, they started doing their own research using non-destructive techniques like chemical analysis, GPR, and metal detector scans, especially. And so these techniques, they were showing, these were all done in the mid 80s mainly, but they were showing that there's a pattern below the ground that's inside the boat-shaped object, but not outside of it. So it's showing that it's a distinct object separate from the landform, the land around it. It's in
Hmm.
the middle of this earth flow, looks like a mud flow, but it's just this really rough terrain. And so when you're walking out there, you have to be very careful. You don't, hurt yourself, break an ankle or something. But once you get onto the boat, it's very smooth and covered in grass, and with the dirt sides, forming the shape, as you can kind of see behind me on the left side.
Right.
This ship shape has never been excavated. So a lot of non-destructive techniques have been used. And then, so fast forward now to our involvement. In 2019, we got permission to scan the boat. And so what happened? We brought in an American team. We didn't know who they were before. I had a friend or an acquaintance actually emailed me one day. It was the end of August, I believe, early September, and I'm sorry, end of September, early October. He basically said, "Hey, I would like to volunteer. Are you guys doing anything out there?" And I said, "Well, we're trying to do GPR work. We believe we have permission now to move ahead, but we don't have a team in place, and we wanted to get it done in 3 weeks. I already had, the winter's coming up, and this is in the mountains, so it will snow." And this guy said, "Well, I have a friend. He's a VP of a company based out of Oregon with offices in the East Coast, and they have a GPR team. Let me see if he is interested in helping get a team together quickly." And within a couple of days, I'd called this guy. We had set up, we agreed on pricing. They gave us a super good discount. They found all the gear they needed to rent. We signed contracts and we bought tickets and everything, and they were good to go. And they showed up 3 weeks later. Now, it just so happened a month before that, the Science Channel had contacted me, and they wanted to do a program about this discovery in Noah's Ark, the research being done. But I told them, like, we don't have anything going on yet. This was maybe June of this year in 2019. I mean, and so I said, "This you're gonna have to pick a date to come out here because they had to get permission, film permits and everything from the Turkish government." And so they picked that same week. They didn't know that this GPR team would show up. We didn't know that that would be the week that the Science Channel would end up, being there. But everything worked
Wow.
out. We had them filming the work being done, and on that trip, we were able to, on basically almost live feed, as they're filming, find these
Wow.
parallel lines and these perpendicular lines, like structure you normally don't see in nature, about 3 feet below the surface. So as the radar screen, you can see on the radar screen, as the radar antenna is going across the ground, and the technician's looking at his screen, he's dialing down through all the different levels, so like ground zero, then going 1 meter down, 2 meter down. He hits 3 meters, about 9 feet. He's like, "Whoa!" And my friend is filming this, and he's like, "This is something here," and you can start seeing on the screen these parallel lines show up, suggestive of man-made structure. And so that got the Science Channel people really excited to film that, and so they started interviewing everybody about what they were seeing. And well, we took that raw data, so we, usually you just collect the data, and it takes a while to process it. So they took all that gigabytes of data. We did LiDAR, we did thermal camera work, but we took all that back to the US. And an American archaeologist who trains archaeologists on how to use radar, so he's a geophysicist himself, he took the data and looked at it, filtered it, and to see what he could see in it. And he gave a report back. I think it was like 3 months later, and we got a report. But he basically had found on the other side of the boat formation, basically, it was 7 meters down, so about 20 feet. It was a series of right angles, looked like partial rooms still preserved
Mhm.
down below in this area of the boat formation, this downhill part of it. And so he wrote in his report that if he was to do an excavation, this is this would be the best spot that he would choose as an archaeologist. This place about 7 meters down, and so that was exciting seeing that. And so the Science Channel show was already on TV at that time, 2020. The pandemic had hit, and so that kind of slowed us down. But I decided by the 1st of January, of February that year to basically live in Turkey. I don't know when the borders would reopen. So that enabled me to connect with all these different Turkish officials and the locals who manage the site. And it got us, connected into the local scene so that we know who to trust and who not to trust. So that started our really focus to do the next step after that. And so we were pushing for excavations, but the Turks at that time, they basically said, look, we want as much non-destructive work to be done before a hole is dug on the site, because it is a very fragile site. And in archaeology, you're like, you basically, what you take out you can't put back. So if you're going to dig this big
Right.
hole, it's going to leave a scar in the site. And so you're hoping that it won't destroy it. If it's a very fragile site, you want as much possible to preserve it. And so then we started looking at soil testing. Um, but before we even got to that point, the original guy who had found the right angles below the ground, this archaeologist in Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. Bigman, whatever reason, we never reconnected with him. So I talked to Salih, who had met in 2000, Dr. Salih Bırakçı, the Turkish geologist, and then I had reconnected with Salih 2021, I think it was. And I asked him, I said, hey, we collected all this data a couple of years ago. We need a new geophysicist who could take the raw data, look at it, and see if they could find anything. We would like to get as much out of this data that we had paid for on this
Right.
expedition. And he said, hey, I know of a lady. She has 40 years experience. He considered her the best in her field that he knew about. And he said, why don't you just upload everything and she can look at it? And he had already talked to her, and she volunteered her time to her and her team. I think she's based out of Connecticut. She has a company that does geophysical surveys in New Hampshire, Connecticut. But we turned everything over to her, and we didn't hear back for maybe 6 months or so. She's doing it in her free time. And so when it came back, she had initially sent an email over, I believe, and asked if we had dug any utility lines down through the site. And because she said she had found something. I said, no, the site's on the side of a mountain. There's a nearby village, but no one's dug out in this area. And it's preserved. It's like a nature preserve or natural geological formation. It's a national park in Turkey, so you can't just go out there and plow it up. So, anyways, she said, well, let me show you over Zoom what I'd found. And it was amazing. I remember I recorded the whole Zoom call, but she had found going down the center of the boat about 4 meters down. And she said it was a big enough tunnel that you could hunch over and walk into most of the places. So she said it was a couple meters in height inside this tunnel. It's not filled in. It's open space. And it goes
So it
from the point.
hadn't been covered with sediment or anything.
No, so what it looked like is that whatever was above it, you can say beams or flooring, that got covered first, but it didn't collapse in on the central wide tunnel. You can
Oh,
call it the
wow.
central hallway, because going down the center line of the boat, and it starts at the pointed upper end, so kind of behind me, that pointed uphill southern end of the boat. That's where it starts, and in fact, there's a void there, like it's a storage open space near you can say the bow or the front of the ship.
Uh-huh.
And then going through that tunnel, it keeps going till the middle where there's a big boulder there now. But under the boulder, she said at the basically the 6 meter depth, all the way down to the 13 meter depth, where we lost our, that's as deep as the GPR data could go. That's where the bottom is. It probably goes deeper, but that's the last data we show for this central void. So she found a big cavity or cave in a square shape. And that's why she was saying, well, there's something here because you have this square shape void in the middle that this tunnel leads to. Now, what's interesting, if you're into, if you believe that Noah's Ark exists and there was a flood, many people have tried to figure out, okay, well, the Bible gives us the basic dimensions, as we mentioned earlier, but not all the details. And so there are people like Answers in Genesis. Now, they don't think this is Noah's Ark, but they actually built almost a full-scale model, 500-foot long model in Kentucky. And so, it's a $500 million project they did as a theme park. And I've been there once. I went there in 2018. And what's interesting, when you go in there, they have a very similar setup where they have, instead of a central atrium for the air and sunlight to go through all the three decks. And what we're seeing on this ship shape is that there's a central cavity just like that. It's going all the way down to further than we can see. But on their model, they have that central cavity as a long corridor down the middle, that kind of like a central atrium that opens up to all the decks. And so very similar idea though. And here we're actually seeing it on the ground with actual data, the same concept. And then the other thing that's interesting is not only we have this central corridor that's still opened up going to this cavity, but on the west side, so in this model, that would be going down this one right here, on the inside from the top, the pointed end of the boat, partially to the down, halfway down before the rock shows up, you have a broken up similar hallway, this tunnel system. And so it's almost like you had a central hallway and then side hallways, and in between would be, the assumption is this is Noah's Ark, would be the rooms or the cages or whatever. Again, this was just recently discovered. She gave me this data back in 2023. And so what we then last year, she's been working on data more. But what's interesting is here, all we did was give her the raw data. She's not part of our team. I don't know if she even believes in Noah's Ark. We didn't ask. All we said, what can you find? And same with what I'm going to tell you guys next. When we did the soil analysis, what happened last year, I had an Australian soil scientist on one of my trips out here with his wife and some others. And I noticed, probably every year this happens, but this is the first year I noticed with my drone, I'm taking photographs of the site, the grass inside, and this is about the end of September was the trip, but the grass inside of the boat shape was a yellow color versus the grass just right outside the edge of the boat shape was normal green. So there's two different types of grass color, and just this artificial ship shape boundary is the only boundary between the two colors. And Dr. Sally Barak-Tuton, the geologist, was there. So I asked the soil scientist, Bill, from Australia, I said, hey, Bill, what do we think is going on here? He said, well, there's definitely something different in the soil inside. That's why, he trains farmers around the world on how to farm. And so what we did, what they did, they designed a soil test survey that would take samples from inside and outside in random locations. And then they listed all the things they wanted to test for in the laboratory. And so we got 88 samples at the end of September, and they sent that. Dr. Sally sent that out. I think it was end of November of last year to Ataturk University, where he used to teach at. They didn't know where the samples came from, and every sample was listed with a random, like A, B, AC or whatever, or 1, 2, 3. So just a random labeling. And within a month, we got the information back. And what it showed in the data set was that you had three main items or three main what do you want to call it, variables in this test set that were different and unique. And even of everything we tested, even the things that are not unique, it tells a story. But what's really important is looking at the ones that were different and seeing if it's something that you could, confidentially say, like, hey, this is unique. Like there's something different inside or outside the boat that makes this boat shape stand out. And what the test showed was that organic matter was almost 3 times higher inside the boat formation versus right outside.
Wow.
And so you think of a decaying boat, you have a lot of organic matter involved.
Sure.
It's very possible it would change the soil chemistry like that and leave a higher organic footprint. And again, this was because we saw the grass growing different. We go out there and take random samples, and a lab does the test. We don't know what to expect. It's not like we, force these results. So everything we're doing is still pointing back to the ship shape being a man-made object that's been decaying there for thousands of years. So not only organic matter was different, but also the pH level was 8 or 9 times lower inside versus outside. And so if bacteria is eating away at the wood and this decomposition is going on, then you're going to expect the pH level to be different inside versus outside. And what we found also that was interesting was the phosphorus, which is used in fertilizing. If you see some people might say, well, maybe they farmed, like the farmers out there did something inside the boat years ago, or actually the phosphorus is the same inside and out. Nothing's changed on that. And we even interviewed last week one of the gentlemen from that village nearby. He was the uncle to Nuri. And Nuri is the man who runs the visitor center, the local Kurdish man. And his uncle is 86 years old or 84. Um, but he's lived there all his life. And he explained the whole history. He said back when he was 10, between 10 or 15 years old, he said one morning, and he said it was not an earthquake, but he could be remembering wrong. But at any rate, he said the side of that mountain gave way, like it was a big earth flow. It became very unstable, and all the ground shifted, and the site changed, so that now you had this huge rough area across the mountainside where they used to do farming. And he said in this area where the boat was at, and just right outside, he said there was mainly this natural grass growing. They don't fertilize. He said so. This would have been the early, like the late 1940s, early 1950s, for the date he was thinking that this happened. And he said once the ground changed, what they saw that was left was this ship shape just sitting on the side of the mountain. And again, he said they didn't farm the area, but that was what was photographed in 1959. And then there was an earthquake that hit between 1960 and the late 70s. An earthquake hit the region, and the soil further dropped away, and so like popped out the boat. So now you
Wow.
have more because from the 1960 photographs from that expedition, the rough terrain outside of the boat shape, that level is right at the same level as the rim of the boat, the shape of the boat.
Hmm.
But by 1970s and 80s and today, everything around it has dropped away except for one little portion, and we now have 20 to 30 foot side walls around the boat because all the
Yeah, you
soil
can see it very different on the images.
yeah, you can see how
Yeah.
it just right here, just bam,
Right.
dropped away behind my head there. But over here, and we have other photographs can show, this is an aerial photo, but we have ground photographs from the early 60s. And all of this rough terrain on the outside, it's just right up against the boat at the same level, basically. So all of that collapsed away further between the 60s and the early
Like,
80s.
like you said, it's kind of popping the boat out for everybody
Yeah,
to see.
it did. And and the really interesting thing is the last couple of months we've been buying from the United States Geological Society declassified spy satellite imagery that Clinton and I think Bush also signed to release. And so you're looking at late 60s through the 70s to the early 80s spy satellite imagery that happens to thankfully cover this area too. And so we've been downloading them $30 a pop and looking at as the site has changed over the years. Well, what's interesting is that the ship shape itself has not changed. Like it's still 300 cubits long, which is 515 feet. It's still the same dimensions everywhere, but outside of the boat and that rough terrain on that mountainside, it changes every year. Even this year, every spring you'll go out there and you'll see new little cracks and crevices and where water's running through it. But the site itself is stable. So again, there's something holding up the site, keeping it stable. And we're
Mhm.
suggesting, there's based on our scans that there's still preserved remains down below the surface, giving this site stability. And what Dr. Bayrak Tutan has noticed also that the soil inside the boat formation is harder. Just you will look up and we walk up and look at it. It's a really tough soil, harder soil, and he would like to test for that. Some of our future tests we want to do look at the chemistry of that part of the soil, like what's going on to keep the soil harder than how it is outside of the boat formation in the mud flow, which is very crumbly, and you can step on it and it'll just fall apart. So who knows when the boat decayed, what other chemical reaction happened that would make the soil this type of this different type of soil inside. So maybe it was the Bible talks about a pitch that kept the boat waterproof. As the pitch decayed, as the wood decayed, it changed the soil so that now today when you walk on it, it's harder composition than outside of it. So these are things we've noticed as being on the site that we still have to figure out why and what's going on. But the soil analysis, that's what hit the news earlier because we're finding almost 3 times higher organic matter just inside of there. And so out of the 88 samples, half of them were taken inside the boat and then half from around the different sides, outside of the boat formation at random spots. Again, and in fact, the soil scientists, I'm looking at the report right here. It says the organic matter, pH level, and phosphates. These are the different, from the chemical analysis, these things were different. And he said they're at the 95 confidence level, meaning there'd be a 5% chance that these are just random, but 95% chance not, that this is actually a different, that there's actually these differences between inside and outside the boat. So we were very excited about that. And that's what it was in the news. But also just seeing this tunnel that now, today, I just got this one of those little kind of what they use for checking out engines, and also plumbers kind of use it. Those endoscopes cameras, the
Mm-hmm.
tiny little camera with the it's on the end of a 10-meter line or whatever. And so we're hoping when we get permission to drill into these holes, stick a camera down,
Oh,
and then we
wow.
can see, who knows what's left. It's just all mud and dirt covered. But if this lady's interpretation is right, she has the 40 years experience in geophysicists. Uh, let's just see what happens then, and then we'll let the world know.
Oh, so exciting. Definitely let me know. I want to
For
make
sure,
sure.
yes.
So how do you deal? I mean, obviously you're a believer. And a lot of this has moved over the years based on faith. And now you're discovering basically overwhelming evidence, in my opinion, 95% confidence level evidence that this is real. So you're bringing science to the conversation of faith, but I'm sure you've got all kinds of people who are just don't want to believe this for whatever reason. What do you say to those skeptics? I mean, I know Ron Wyatt went
Yeah,
through a lot of skepticism over his lifetime too,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
How do you deal with that? I mean, stay positive, and what is your response?
Well, I remember at first when I was involved, I didn't expect to be at the like on the ground, the guy, like boots on the ground type of guy. And when I first heard about this, it was a personal journey, something
Hmm.
that I just wanted to study out. I just got really involved, calling people who were involved. When I was in high school and college, I didn't have the funds to go over there and do anything on my own, but I wanted to hear what everyone else did. But I also talked to critics, those who worked with Ron that changed their mind, and those who never believed anything he said. So I was interested in the whole story, positive and negative. I always believed, I grew up as a Christian, and I was interested in these Bible stories, especially the Old Testament stories that just seem so fantastical, like the Red Sea crossing and the flood, Mount Sinai, the giving of the law, like things you couldn't really prove physically today yet.
Yeah.
And it was as a kid, I was like, wow, it'd be awesome to have proof. And so when Ron White said he had proof, I was interested in hearing it, but I wasn't just like gung ho. Oh, Ron White said it, I believe it.
Right.
But as a kid, I was really interested in knowing how he did his research and who he worked with and what did they have to say. Until middle of college, I went over there to see the site myself. So when someone is if they're not negative, but if they're just skeptical, to me that's okay. If you want to wait and see, I don't feel bad. Again,
Hmm.
this is not going to affect me in the sense personally. Like someone says, I don't think that's Noah's Ark. okay, it's not a salvational issue. Like if you think this is Noah's Ark, or you think over there that's Noah's Ark, that doesn't affect me as much. But um, I do think though that when you have something like you're saying, 95% confidence level, it's something I want to share then. And so when
Yeah.
I started doing this, I was just going over personally, seeing these sites, but then people wanted me to share, and I really hated going up front. I had this fear of speaking to any size group of people, and I overcame that, thankfully, God's grace, to be able to talk and give this information. I was a computer programmer, so you sit behind a desk and drink, energy drinks. You make a website, or I was into developing apps, and so that was your life, and then you go hang out with other nerds. So when you get in front of people, they're going to ask you questions. And you got to present something, and I have a very logical mind. Like the facts have to line up. It has to make sense, and so that's how I present stuff. It's okay. Like here's the shape, here's this, here's that. And it's less touchy feely type thing. Is more okay. What do you have on the ground? And everything we've done, like it's not like we did the GPR scans and it's like, oh, there's nothing there. No, we do the scans and we start seeing parallel lines on this side, right angles down below on this side, and then years later we're seeing tunnels and chambers. So that it's when I see stuff like that happen, and it's same with the soil. Like we take a sample, we ship it off to the lab, and then they come back and say, well, there's a big difference between organic
Right.
matter. I'm like, okay, again, that's another positive thing that's pointing to this being a man-made object that's boat-shaped. So here's the interesting about the boat shape, and I forgot to mention this earlier. Um, this guy, we had a large tour group 2 weeks ago. 22 people from Florida, a Christian church group came out, and on there, you meet random people. Even when you have your own private tours, you have other people showing up. It's a public site. And this guy came up to me. I was in the visitor center, and he said, "You're Andrew Jones." I said, "Yeah." "Who are you?" And he said, "Well, I've been watching your videos." And he was an older gentleman. And I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "Well, let me tell you something. This is a shipwreck on the side of a mountain." And I looked at him and said, "Well, how do you know? Like, have you been doing research here?" And he said, "Well, I was a Coast Guard captain for 2 ships. I was in the Coast Guard 40 years. Then I was on
Wow.
the National Security Council of one of the presidents. And he said, now I'm a consultant with a private firm for the Saudi military." I was like, wow, okay, you're well accomplished. And he said, when you look at the shape of this boat object on the side of the mountain, he said and we interviewed him. And so I'll put up on my channel maybe next week. But he said, when you look at the ship shape, he said, that's the same shape we built our ships in World War II. And then later, the Coast Guard ships started using the same shape in the early 90s. It has a pointed bow and a rounded or blunt stern or back end of the ship. And so I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And he was explaining why you need a pointed bow. And it's some of the same things that Answers of Genesis, who's against, they're against the site being Noah's Ark. They haven't done any research out there. That's another topic. But they did make some great videos explaining that Noah's Ark was not a barge and that it had to be a ship shape as the best type of design in a global big storm, out in the open seas. And he explained the exact same thing as the former captain of 2 Coast Guard ships. He said, you have a pointed bow to cut through the waves. And if
Right.
you're free floating with no engine or no sail, then you have it helps by having the boat. We use drogue stones or weights on the ship to not only stabilize the ship, but turn it into the waves and keep it pointed directly in the waves so you don't become parallel to these huge, massive, 90-foot high or whatever waves that could capsize and turn your ship over. And he said the same thing for the backside. When you have waves coming at you from behind, the backside, if it's a rounded stern like that, it helps disperse the energy.
Mhm.
And he had given really great answers. And if I later, I don't know, he was a random guy that just came and gave me some great answers. So I looked him up on YouTube. And sure enough, he's like interviewed on CNN about some hostage crisis, and then I knew, okay. And he has his PhD, so he's actually a doctor. But I think he wrote a book about the Exodus. So, well accomplished individual. But happened to show up on one of my tours a couple weeks ago and explain the ship shape. And so so for me, when someone says, "Well, I don't think this is Noah's Ark," that's okay. I'm moving forward because I have so much positive data that if everything was just a mix, like some positive, some negative, I'll be okay. Yeah, well, maybe not. But everything we do keeps pointing to this site having a man-made purpose, and that is not a random geological mound of rocks and dirt. but actually a decayed wooden ship, then I can be more positive and I'll keep going forward. Now, I believe that God doesn't want anyone to perish. So when you look at the data out there, and whether it's archaeology or creation science, different things that point to the existence of God and that the Word of God is real, then I think God is using these discoveries to help people who are looking for truth.
Yeah.
There are honest
Yeah.
searchers out there. Not everyone needs this. I believe by faith Noah's Ark happened, and the flood, and Noah existed. So I don't need to go find those art to accept the story. But many people out there who are honest searchers need it. And just like Doubting Thomas, he looked
Hmm.
for Jesus after the crucifixion, the resurrection. He heard the stories, but he needed more than just hearing the stories. He needed the physical proof. And God was willing to give that to him, even though he said, "Blessed are those who don't need this," But he
Hmm.
knew that Thomas needed this, his disciple, and so he showed him his fingerprints and the scar on the side of him, of his body. And so, yeah, I think God is doing the same thing with different types of discoveries in archaeology or science, and that will help people. So I'm not going to give up if someone is going to make a video. I saw recently some videos attacking and they're making jokes about the site, and if it was 10 years ago, I'll be like, oh man, I don't want to
Right.
become known
Well,
on
it's
YouTube. Like,
interesting. It's like clearly God is with you. He keeps sending, the timing with the Science Channel and the the lidar and all the different things that are happening, the discoveries that you're getting, the experts that are weighing in, months after getting data, and I mean all of this is clear evidence that God is speaking through you and your work. So that's incredible. And it almost takes Well, the irony of this is it almost takes more faith and work and effort to believe there is no God and there is no Noah's Ark than it does to believe that there is, based on the evidence that you keep compiling.
well, this is interesting. Just last week, a Turkish friend of mine, a really good friend, he's a Muslim believer, but he helped us with our different film permits. He works in the Turkish government, and he sent me a link, and so I downloaded it and I looked at it, and it was basically a Turkish scientist from a top university here, uh, a geologist. He wrote a piece. It's not peer reviewed, but he just wrote a piece and put it up on academia or research, whatever, one of those websites. It's a personal paper attacking the site. I was like, oh no. So I started reading this thing. And then most of the paper is like all the stuff, the fluff around it. When you get to the heart of what he was saying, he's saying exactly what some of the critics said in the early 90s or mid 90s, that this site is a rock formation, a syncline. And I talked to Sally, who just happened. I was going to meet him a couple days later, so I sent him the link. He said, "Oh no, not again." And it's basically the same theory that you have this syncline, which is a type of eroded layers that could form an oval shape, but it basically is layers of rock that they're saying. And the guy in his article has a photo of him standing right near the ship shape. He's up on the hillside looking down on it. Um, and so it's almost as if the guy is blind, because if he actually walked out to it, maybe he did, but he didn't want to say. When you walk on it and around it, this is a dirt shaped object. It's not a solid piece of rock. If it's a solid
Yeah,
granite rock or solid limestone, yeah, you can say, oh, okay, somehow got eroded
sure.
into the shape. No, but so when you have people who can't even, they're geologists, and that's where Saleh, who's a geologist and has spent years searching and researching the site and the mountainside here, when he can point out, hey, this is why this is not a syncline. And he explained it to me, and I got it on video. But I'm not a geologist, so for me to explain it's kind of difficult. But he basically said it's on the wrong axis. The way the bedding layers are at the site, coming from the Iranian side, because we're about a mile from Iran, and all these different layers are coming down, going north to south. He said the axis, if this was a syncline, would be this way and not the way it is. The site is today. But and the site again is not solid rock. Just from his explanations about the geology, and you can see from our drone photographs, all the layers and which way the folds are going in this mountainside, easily disproved. But here's somebody who with a top-notch university. He wrote I don't know if it's a quick paper, but he wrote this paper, and it's spewing out the same thing that the guy Professor Collins wrote in the 90s, attacking the site. The same theory that it's a syncline, and so. to me, it's almost as if they shoot themselves in the foot. They
Right.
try to they're trying to attack the site, but then when they attack it, it can always come down to, okay, what's the shape from, and what's giving it stability. If this is random rocks and dirt, it should have, the last 60 years spread out, disappeared, gone, whatever. No, it's same
Yep.
shape it's always been, but around it's always changing. So you tell me what it is. So they have two theories, and both of them they go back to saying it's a big solid rock, and it's not.
Right.
So one, they say it's a big solid rock that came out down from the mountainside. This is published in 2010, I think. Another Turkish geologist, and he what's his name? So it's a M. Uh, anyways, with Murat Advinci. And so in his article, he said the solid limestone block came down from higher up on the mountainside, got stuck where it's at today. And then he said glaciers over millions of years went over this site and weathering, and it gave it the ship-shaped look. And Sally points out, said, look, and
Into
I just mentioned,
perfection.
you're walking around this thing, it's dirt. It's not a solid piece of rock. So, well, where's this glacier at? There's no evidence of a glacier in that area in the past. And again, it's not rock. So, we let them say what they want, but these critics, but unless they give a better explanation, we're still moving forward with our
Well,
test.
it's almost
Uh,
comical.
well, and we had, and I hate to say it, it was another group, I won't mention their name, but the well-known creation group. And they were attacking us for testing. They said, well, these guys are testing it because their agenda is because they're trying to fundraise to do more tests. I said, okay, maybe that is our agenda, but we do want to do tests, whether that's the end goal or we want to get money to do bigger tests later. We are still doing tests on this site and doing research. But that's your attack against us, is that
Right.
what our soil tests and our the GPR was so that we could do more tests in the future. And that's why we're in the news today. And in fact, the news that hit, someone asked me, said, "Did you pay for these articles?" I said, no, nothing was paid for. It wasn't like paid press. People contacted us. They said, "Well, hey, what's the latest news and what's going on?" And we never like reached out and put out a press release saying, "Please, call us for an interview." So.
Oh, it's fantastic. I really commend you for what you're doing. I had Barry Schwartz on the program before he passed away, and he led the analysis of the Shroud of Turin, and it was really interesting because he went into that whole analysis as being a skeptic and came out being a complete believer. And I wonder if is there anybody on your team or anybody that you've encountered along the pathway that has come in very highly skeptical and kind of walked away saying, "Oh my gosh, this is real."
Well, I'm trying to think. Everyone who's helped us has they believe in the Bible. Like the people who showed up to last year, he heard this site build, but it kind of like when we did the soil test, we didn't know what the results would be. We said, "Hey,
Hmm.
let's design one to see what happens." When he got here, he said, "Hey, this has to be a shipwreck." Just looking at it, and then when we got the soil analysis done, he wasn't really a skeptic though. Um, I'm trying to think. When the Science Channel was here, I know the producer, the whole team was actually either agnostic or atheist.
Hmm.
When they found those parallel lines that were about 3 meters down, he was so excited and filming it. And the next day, he told us he had called his grandmother or mother. He said that she was a believer, and he was so excited to tell her that he was. And he said this to us that I told her that I'm possibly working on the discovery of Noah's Ark. And so he himself, love these Hollywood types that don't care about religion or anything like that. It's
Sure.
just a job now to film. And they're all from London. So, who knows? Some of us planting seeds. Who knows what he believes now or what the results will be? But I can't think of someone offhand where it's like like a stark contrast where they think they're
So
against
what
it and then they switch their mind. But
so what's next? You mentioned the sending in the scopes. Like where are you, what's your kind of plan and your your agenda to explore this further and what areas are you trying to create more proof around?
well, the biggest thing is ground truthing. So yeah, we have a lot of scans we have people who've done scans like the ERT. I was there to watch that in 2014. It uses electricity to map out what's below the ground. So that's like a third party scan. You have the Turkish government who did their own ERT in 2021, and we're still trying to get that data released so we can analyze it and publish what we think of in the scan data. Then we have our GPR, which is in 2019 and had it reanalyzed in 2023. We would like to. There's a couple other type of scans that like the Turkish geologists would like to do. One is a microgravity, and the other is seismic, which would go a lot deeper and give us a profile of the bedrock below. Because some critics have claimed that because there's a big boulder in the middle of the ship, and they say, "Oh, this is bedrock," that this is a column of rock that kind of goes up like a chimney, and then hundreds of feet in the if you removed all the dirt, it'd be hundreds of feet in the air, and now we're seeing the top of it right in the middle of the boat, and then the mudslide goes around this rock and forms a ship shape. That was one of the theories. But it's not, from the ERT scans and from Salih's geological studies. Number one, that rock is from the geological studies. It's a different type of limestone than the limestone at that altitude of the mountainside. This rock is from way up near the top. There's a big limestone ridge with fossilized coral at the base of it, and other seashells. And this is the type of limestone that's right in the middle of the boat. Is this and the limestone and other type of sedimentary rock that's at the altitude where the ship is at, the elevation where the ship is, it's a redder color, or more orange or pinkish. It's a different type of chemical makeup, and so then plus the ERT scans from 2014 shows that it's a free floating boulder, just like Salih was saying from his geological studies. So if we can get some seismic scans done, it would further show the whole profile for where bedrock is in that valley where the ark is. It's sitting in the dirt. So that's one thing. But to ground truth all of that, we would like to core drill, get down maybe a 100-meter core drill, or 50-meter, something that would go deep enough that could maybe even hit the bedrock down below, but go right through where we think the depth of this ship remains are. So whether the formation is 60 feet worth of data, decaying remains or whatever, we want to go through all of that and pull up a sample. Now, they tried to do coring in 1988, and Dr. Salih Tutin was in charge. And this was John Baumgartner's effort from America. Dr. Baumgartner, a creationist, he's still around, but he changed his mind that this was Noah's Ark. And he, though, went around and people asked him, well, why did you change your mind? Because your GPR, in the GPR report in 1987 that him and Dr. Salih did, and Salih's a believer, he's the geologist. The geophysicist changed his mind, the American geophysicist, John Baumgartner. And people asked him, why do you change? Because his report said there's nothing in the GPR data that would disprove the idea that this is Noah's Ark. That was in the actual report they gave out. In 88, he said, well, we went back and we drilled down and we hit bedrock really close to the surface. And so he said, this is too shallow. You can't have the Noah's Ark there because you're hitting bedrock right underneath the ground. I talked to Salih and said, well, you were there with Baumgartner. What happened on that trip? He said, we only did one or two basic drill attempts. It was a Turkish drilling machine, and it was water-based, which means, he said, when you try to pull up a whole complete core that shows all the layers underneath the ground, so when we pull up that core with a water cooling machine cooling the bit, it just washed all the data away. So all we had was pebbles in the bottom of the core machine, whatever that I don't know what they call it, but at the very bottom is just pieces of rock. He said no useful data, so he stopped the whole attempt. He said we have the wrong type of machine. Right. So he said it's totally wrong what Baumgartner's claiming, that they got all this data and it shows that there's shallow bedrock right there. So we would like to do a complete core with it's a dry machine that uses foam. There's other techniques too, but that would cool the bit, and then we can get a complete core like you see when they do like in Antarctica and the ice sheets, or other locations where you get this whole long tube of data, and then you can analyze every single layer. Because we would like to see, like when it shows right angle, let's see what that is, or when it shows a thick deposit layer, or also these voids, these rooms. Let's drill right into those with the core machine, stick a camera. So those are some of the really important things we like to do, whether it's going to be this summer or next summer. We need to finish up some of these geophysical, non-destructive surveys. put these they're probably about 3 inch cores, drill down different places on the boat formation and outside too. Um, Further, some of the chemical analysis of the soil hardness that Sally wants to do, and also some of the rocks in the area. From a geologist standpoint, he has his own studies he would like to do. So these are all on our agenda. Now we did get approached by someone who is interested in basically paying for everything. We don't know if that will happen. We're in the middle of the discussions, but it was just not a random thing. Someone emailed me and said, "Hey, my boss saw your New York Post article, or the article about your work, and would like to get a hold of Andrew Jones." So I did a podcast with this guy, and the his secretary, with the email, he had a link, and to her bosses. I said, "Oh, I don't know who this guy is." I click it. It's his Wikipedia page. This guy, and he's worth billions of dollars. And I was like, "Oh, well, why does the billionaire want to enter this site?" And so I talked to a friend of mine who deals with high-end donors. And he said, "Well, Andrew, just get all your stuff together because he's not there to chit chat." So
Right.
I
Awesome.
do a Zoom call with him 2 weeks ago, and he's like, "Yeah." He explains all he's done. It's amazing. And then he asked, "Well, tell me about yourself." I said, "Well, not as accomplished as you, but here's what we're doing on the boat." And he said, "Well, I'm interested in funding it." So my friend was right that he was interested in that level. He said, "Can you tell me everything you want to do and the cost?" And so we'll see what happens. For me, it's up to, how fast we go is up to God. So if
Yeah.
God wants something like that done with this individual, it'll work out. If he doesn't, then we'll go at the speed that he wants it done. But we have a whole list of things we'd like to finish. And I mentioned today some of these items that will help, especially the coring, that will help show us what's below the surface, finally. So
Well, you mentioned something. I meant to get into this earlier, but you mentioned the altitude. How give us an idea of what this, how high is this up from the bottom of the valley, and kind of some idea of like how high the water must have been to take it there.
so the current location for the site is about, so it's 515 feet long. So you can say the average where it's at is 6,500 feet. The valley floor is about a mile high, so 5,000 or so feet is the valley floor. It's quite a dramatic scene from where you're at when you're walking there, because you're looking down the steep mountainside and you see the valley below. You can see the border between Iran and Turkey, the border station. On a clear day, you can look over the Lesser Ararat area, and in the distance, you'll see the mountains of Armenia. And then right in front of you, you see the big volcano, the highest mountain in Turkey, Mount Ararat, which is a little over 16,000 feet.
Wow.
So a very dramatic area. Now we believe, based on if you look at this satellite imagery, that the ship did not originally land where it's at; that it actually landed higher up on this mountainside. So about a mile up is the actual top of this low mountain range,
Hmm.
and that's the current Turkish-Iranian border. So you can look up and see the Turkish military towers that be about 500 feet or 500 meters, and right there is the international border. And somewhere near that area is at the top of the mountain, the Ark would have landed, and you can follow the mud flow or earth flow down the side of the mountain, even down to the bottom valley. And right in this narrow channel between two hills is where the ship is at today. So like got stuck and pushed over to the west side of this narrow channel, and that's where it's at.
So the water had to be just astronomically high to take it.
Well, and so it depends. And at the top, you have evidence that it was covered with water near the top, because we found coral, shallow water seashells. These fossils that were found near shallow waters is up there near the
Hmm.
top. But if there's also the process of what happened after the flood with the uplifting of continents and mountains being formed that would have affected the height of this area. So it's hard to estimate what was the actual height of the water during the flood. Definitely, it covered the top of the landmass.
Right.
And this area was underwater based on the fossils around seashells.
Fascinating. Well, it's been awesome to talk to you. I wish you nothing but the best, and God bless you, and everybody that's working on your team. I hope we can stay in touch, and I would love to know, just another update from you as soon as you have something new to share. I hope you can reach out to me and we can do something again, to update this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm willing to and very happy to share everything that we can. So yeah, we'll keep in contact, and I'm glad to share with your audience and what's going on, and keep us in your prayers. And yeah, if anyone wants to come out here, by the way, either on their own and just meet up with us, they can contact us through our website, or if they want to go on one of our tours, they can do that too. But yeah, we're always here, willing to share with people who show up. Yesterday, we were at the site. It was like Polish Day. We had like 2 or 3 different Polish groups coming through and asking questions. If they spoke English. So yeah, every day is a mix of people around the world.
Share your website now, if you don't mind, so I can make sure that people get it.
Yeah, it's Noah's Ark Scans, so plural, noahsarkscans.com. And on there has different research papers for and against. We don't, whatever people say, we put it out there. We have our own research there, links to our different videos and different reports of our research too. And then the tours are also listed there. And then there's a contact page if someone wants to contact us.
Awesome.
noahsarkscans.com.
Andrew Jones, thank you so much for your time. Stick around here. I'm going to hit stop on the record, but I'd love to just wrap up with you offline. So thank you so much for your time joining us. And again, best of luck to you.
Thank you.
If you're looking to improve your memory or lower your stress and inflammation, you got to hear about our new sponsor, Igniton. Igniton is the world's first quantum wellness brand, merging ancient energetics with cutting-edge physics. And this stuff really works. It's clinically proven, and we'll talk about that in a second. Their formulas are charged with something called ignitons. They're subatomic quasi-particles from the sun and originally identified in private research at CERN. This is heavy physics. Igniton's space-age technology entangles these particles with supplement ingredients to supercharge them and make them work better. Here's what makes this really exciting. In university-led, peer-reviewed studies, Ignicognition, Igniton's flagship brain formula, was shown to improve total memory by 100% in just 30 days. That includes short-term, operational, and working memory. It's crazy. The Igni longevity formula, their cellular stress and aging formulation, reduced inflammation markers like C-reactive protein, or CRP, and interleukin-6, or IL-6, by 37% and 54% respectively in just 60 days. Huge impact. These studies were compared to both placebo and to the same supplement ingredients that were not charged with ignitons. This isn't hype. It's clinical, quantum-enhanced nutrition designed to help your body align with higher levels of clarity, coherence, and resilience. I've been using both formulations now for about 60 days, and seriously, I've never felt better. Sharper, I have more energy, I recover faster from my workouts, I don't get that afternoon swoon, and I'm even sleeping through the night, every night. Visit igniton.com and use code Ashley10 to get 10% off your first order. That's igniton.com, igniton.com. And the code is Ashley10 for 10% off your first order. Igniton, born from light, backed by science.
Thanks for listening to Ashley On. Nothing but the truth for a better you and me.